So let me ask you, obviously at the beginning of this invasion in February, Russia had every advantage as far as experience, equipment, personnel. Why do you think after 7 months that the Russian military has so underperformed?
I think a lot of it has to do with training. Um, for the most part, if you take away the javelins, for the most part, Russia and Ukraine have similar equipment. At least at the starting point, they did. They both had Soviet era fighters, with Russia having a slight advantage to more modern fighters. They both had the same kinds of tanks. You could argue that the T-64 was maybe a little bit better than some of the remodeled T-64 was a little bit better than what Russia was putting out. But for the most part, their tanks were at parity. Their armored fighting vehicles were at parity. I think a lot of it just came down to training. I mean, if Russia had a year to train their troops and actually took their training seriously, I think we would have seen a different outcome. So I think training is the major factor. The other problem for Russia is logistics. They just don't have a modern logistics system. And a lot of that's because their logistics were set up, and I did a video on this. There's logistics were set up for what's called push logistics, where essentially they're designed to fight a nuclear war, where you get supplies whether you need it or not. And they have mathematical formulas and tables, and they go, all right, a motor rifle unit can fight for 72 hours. Then they need this much water, this much fuel, this much ammunition, and so on. And they push it to you. And your count might be off, but it's wasteful, but so is war. NATO has pull logistics, where you call back and you say, hey, I need this thing, or I need a log pack with this, 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 and this, and you get sent that log pack. I think the reason Russia did that, it's just easier to simplify logistics by using push logistics. And it would also be useful in a nuclear war, because if communications were down to from electromagnetic pulse, you're getting your stuff whether you asked for it or not. And so that's actually a really smart way of doing things, and it works well if you have a lot of stuff. But I think because their logistics were set up to fight this one narrow war, they didn't have enough trucks, they didn't have enough logistical specialists, and they don't know how to palletize anything. I did a video about that this morning. That American howitzer charges, which is the propellant that you put into the howitzer to make the gun fire. Americans, we have this palletized, and they're in these containers that you can pull off, and the containers
Can
have
you
handholds.
explain in more detail what you mean by palletize?
Sure. So pallet when you go to Costco, and there's a on the floor, there's usually a pallet. It's holding up the goods that you're selling, and you can move that pallet around by forklift. Well, Russia doesn't tend to palletize their stuff. They're loading it into box cars, or they're throwing it onto trucks, and they just don't have the tactical forklifts to move this stuff around. And so it's a very human-centric mode of transportation. Whereas NATO is all about palletization. We have specialized shipping containers. We have specialized HEMTs that I can't remember the name of them, but you can put the container on the HEMT. The HEMT puts it right up on top of the vehicle. You can move out with the stuff, and everything down to, like I said, the charges. They can be palletized. You can take them off of the pallet with a gloved hand, and there's plenty of handholds on it. They can be stacked. So everything that NATO has is centered around palletization and easy movement through logistics. And Russia's still fighting as if it were World War II.
Stuff just tossed in the back of a truck with a blanket over it or something.
Yeah, you see that. And also what you've seen is Russia's run out of trucks to the
Yeah.
point where they're using civilian trucks. And I've seen pictures of this, they've taken artillery rounds, and they've literally thrown the artillery rounds in the back of trucks. They've taken them out of the packing crates, because the crates add weight.
Oh,
So
wow.
they're just throwing these rounds in. Now, they're not fused, but it's still not something I want to do either, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want want to say they don't know how to fight a war, but they certainly don't know how to do modern logistics.